Okay, starting to get into the tail end of the first week of this full season release of The War Within, we have the first surprise of the tier. Because as we have been checking the popularity of the specs and the performance of the specs in the raid up to Heroic this last reset as well as Mythic Plus, something interesting has been going down in Mythic raiding. Because, you know, usually more of the attention is given to the results of the DPS, right? Here they are, here's how the DPS are doing right now. Now, sure, you can definitely see some specs being stronger than others. You yourself, if you have been checking things like the race to world first or even just raided yourself, you noticed things about Fury Warrior, Havoc Demon Hunter, Frost DK, Elemental Shaman. You definitely also noticed the opposite about Balance Druid, about Shadow Priest or Affliction Warlock. However, we wouldn't really call any of this, you know, like crazy or like a huge surprise. Most of this is... It's a pretty smooth balancing line for the moment. There are strong specs, there are weak specs, but it looks kind of okay. That's why we are mentioning the surprise for now, for this first week, doesn't rest with the DPS. For once, the focus of the beginning of the season goes instead to the healers. Because this is the situation of the healers right now. The situation of the healers right now tell us that Preservation Evoker is the strongest healer, possibly the strongest release, week 1 release healer we have seen in, at the very least, recent memory. In fact, funnily enough, maybe only Preservation Evoker at the release of Dragonflight was this strong. So we are getting a repeat. Preservation is now 2 for 2 when it comes to expansion release power. However, the surprise doesn't just end here. We're not talking about it's a surprise that for once something more odd happens to healers rather than to the DPS specs. The surprise is that it's not even what people expected was going to be played, because we are talking about Flameshaper Evoker, not even Chrono Warden Evoker. Now, by many players, for many weeks, even months, up to now, even if you have been checking guides, for example, guides updated to even just 3 days ago are still telling you to just default to Chrono Warden Evoker. Even guides on Wowhead, for example, for pretty much all content, they recommend Chrono Warden Evoker. The default raiding build recommended is the Chrono Warden Evoker build. The Flameshaper Evoker is kind of snubbed, you know. It's very difficult, very complicated. It only has strong burst healing via Consume Flame, as opposed to this one who has pretty much everything. So even now, to this day, when you look at this, if you go online and you watch or read the most updated guides, they're still telling you that Chrono Warden is powerful. Well, actually, all of this, or most of this, is coming from the other build that nobody cared about. And the reason why it brings me so much joy to be making this video is because I said this. I said this was going to happen. So I take full credit. I pointed out Flameshaper Evoker was going to be a Discipline Priest on steroids. It is the better, cooler, stronger and younger version of Discipline Priest and everything Discipline Priest hopes to be. And that if we are ever in a tier where you do need this kind of very high burst healing, then Flameshaper was going to be huge. But let's give a small, quick intro to all of the barbaric, ignorant, zag-zag DPS who have absolutely no idea of what we are talking about. They don't even know Flameshaper was a hero talent for a healer because they don't know about healers to begin with. What makes this so insane? Well, definitely not anything up to here. You know, all of this, if this was the hero talent was dead. It was one of the worst in the game, doesn't really do anything better than what Chrono Warden does. However, things go into overdrive with this. Because Flameshaper does give you a hot or a dot you can put on targets engulf. You have 2 charges on a 30-second cooldown, which is terrible. Nobody cares about it. You don't actually want to use it for this. What you want to use this for is to burn, is to suck 4 seconds of Dream Breath to explode those 4 seconds worth of healing to all players for 300% of the amount that the hot would have healed. This is extremely powerful for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, it is extremely powerful because, first of all, the hero talent itself buffs the healing of Dream Breath by 20%. You also still have your own talents, for example, Call of Ysera, which can buff your next Dream Breath after Verdant Embrace by 40%. And now you even have your tier set. An insane tier set, almost worth all of the other healers' 4 pieces combined, which makes your temporal compression not just makes you cast faster, but also increase the heal. of the Empower spell you are using. And because Engulf gets its healing from the amount of healing you do with Dream Breath, increasing the heal of Dream Breath by 40% through your tier set makes this incredibly powerful. And all of these, of course, can stack. You can use Verdant Embrace to gain the 40% from Call of Ysera. You can make sure you have 4 stacks of Temporal Compression for your tier set to make Dream Breath 40% stronger, and then you have your own hero talent which further buffs Dream Breath by another 20%. So now this mega buffed Dream Breath gets consumed, it blows up for 300% of that healing in raid-wide healing. And that's the second super powerful part. Maybe you haven't noticed as a brainlet DPS, but healers don't usually get ways to heal everyone for free. Generally, if you want something that heals 20 players, or even 15, you have to spend major cooldowns. You have to spend actually very large thing to make sure you can hit 20 players, Tranquility or Divine Hymn, or you have to use a full ramp worth of several seconds of preparation as a Discipline Priest. Every other one of your healing abilities don't hit 20 players, or even 15, or most of them even 10. They will hit between 5 and 8 targets, like Dream Breath hitting 5, like Spirit Bloom hitting 1, 2, 3, 4 depending on your channel level, even things like Circle of Healing, Sanctify, Wild Growth, Power Word Radiance, Chain Heal, they are all between 5 to 6 targets. This one is not. This one just heals everyone when you use it. Yes, it has reduced healing beyond 5 targets, but it doesn't matter. It's clearly not reduced enough. And this power is enormous. Being able to have on demand, on 2 charges of 30-second cooldown, the ability to heal everyone in the raid is very, very big for raid healing. It's obviously mostly irrelevant for Mythic Plus, which is why nobody plays Flameshaper in Mythic Plus, because in Mythic Plus you can cover your entire party with a single Temporal Anomaly. You have no need to have massive 20-man target healing in Mythic Plus, so this is not nearly as powerful, but in the raid it becomes huge. And to make it even better, the tier set of Preservation Evoker makes this practically perfect for this hero talent. It's very, very, very powerful. The other part which is making this hero talent extremely good at the moment is the ease of use. Now, it's not still very simple. You still have some things you have to pay attention to. For example, something that many players have started paying attention to right now is the hard-casted tracker for Dream Breath. The reason for this is because at the moment, your 4-piece set bonus, the one that gives you 40% more healing to your Dream Breath, doesn't work on your echoed Dream Breaths. So only on your original Dream Breath casts. So you have to use things like Weak Auras to glow, for example, on whoever has the original Dream Breath on. Because when you're casting Engulf, you want to try to make sure you are engulfing a target that has the original Dream Breath, because the original Dream Breath was buffed by 40% from your tier. So that original Dream Breath is healing for more than your copied Dream Breath through echoes or temporal anomalies, which means if it heals for more, this explosion will be for more. But even if you have to pay attention to that, it is still far, far easier than something nightmarish like, for example, the ramp of a Discipline Priest. Because the ramp of a Preservation Evoker playing Flameshaper is Verdant Embrace into Dream Breath into Double Engulf. That is your ramp done. You pressed 4 buttons, 3 of which were instacast that you can cast on the move, and you are done with your preparation. If you want to have the even bigger ramp, then you do Verdant Embrace into Stasis to then copy Dream Breath and Double Engulf. So you can then reactivate Stasis and repeat this again. That is how snapshot quick this type of ramp is, which is miles, light years ahead of the ramp, for example, of a Discipline Priest. But even of the ramp of something like a Resto Druid, who wants to, ramp, placing down multiple rejuvenations, etc., 10 to 15 seconds long, much like Discipline. In the case of Preservation Evoker, it is much, much faster. What is also extremely valuable about this build is that it costs you practically nothing. Even if you go for this mega ramp as an evoker, you can still use Temporal Anomaly and Verdant Embrace to then heal with Life Bind and Spirit Bloom. You can still use Temporal Anomaly to place down reversions, and you can talent yourself in Grace Period, so that every player that has reversion on is healed for 10% more, and this 10% heal also counts Consume Flame, so that makes your burst even stronger. You are still an evoker that can use the full ramp of Emerald Communion, you still have your Rewind, you still have your Dream Flight, so you're keeping all of your powerful tools. The only thing you're losing is one Dream Breath that you have to cast to pair with Engulf. But even then, it's not that those Dream Breaths disappear. Those Dream Breaths actually continue to heal. Those Dream Breaths actually do reasonable amount of healing. And to finish, in case we needed even more powerful tools about this Evoker build, is that they practically don't spend mana. That is one of the more powerful tools of this build, which might go under the radar because many are, focused on the HPS numbers, but the mana conservation of this build is incredible. Admittedly, both builds of Evoker are pretty good at conserving mana, but this one even more so. Engulf itself costs very little mana. Temporal Anomaly has been significantly buffed in the amount of mana it costed. It used to be 13% of base mana, now it's just down to 7.5. So you don't even have mana problems throughout the raid, which is a problem that many other healers that we can see doing well right now, for example Resto Shaman, have much more easily. This is your Evoker dropping to 25% mana at the very end of Mythic Rashanan, and then you have your Resto Shaman sort of going dry over a minute earlier than that. That further makes the build very powerful. But the most powerful thing is definitely how fast it can be to pull off this kind of ramping. If this was only powerful, this Consume Flame only worked through echoes, which means you had to use Temporal Anomaly and a whole bunch of echoes to actually make this work, then it would be reasonably average. You would be replacing spreading Dream Breaths or spreading reversions with spreading this explosion, so you wouldn't be getting healing from both of them. You would be choosing which one to go for. But in this situation, for this build, it's not like that. You can do both. You can use all of your echoes for other things and then heal more with this combo. They are completely, separate kinds of healing for the spec. When you look at this Evoker healing throughout the fight and you check for the uses of Engulf, you will see the Verdant Embrace before using Stasis and then using Dream Breath. After the Dream Breath, you store one Engulf and then a second Engulf on the same target, and then you release your Stasis, which will replicate the healing. This happened between 325 to 345. You go back to check the healing between 325 and 345 or so, and it's happening around here. This type of burst healing, which happened with quite few buttons. That is what at the moment is making Flameshaper Evoker build so powerful. You have the same very good tools you had before as a Preservation Evoker, except now you also have massive burst healing. So it is an incredibly powerful heal spec, and the reason why most of the raiding guilds right now are pushing for it. The spec will lower itself down to be more okay-ish once players have more gear and raid bosses are nerfed. So this type of healing doesn't just snipe every type of damage from other healers. At the moment it is required because top level players are somewhat under-geared and the bosses are not nerfed, so they would die if they didn't have this type of burst healing. But a few weeks from now it won't be the case anymore. At the same time though, we can also say that a few weeks from now this build will be nerfed significantly. Either the two charges will go on a 45-second cooldown, either the Consume Flame power will only consume 3 or 2 seconds of Dream Breath, or it will empower the healing of Dream Breath by 200% or 100%, or maybe it will put a target cap. Instead of being simply diminished past 5 targets, it will only cap at like 8 or 10 targets. But either way, the build itself will be nerfed. That being said, before we even start to hear evokers crying about it, it's still worth pointing out that the other version, Chrono Warden, is still quite good. Chrono Warden number 1 is the default option in Mythic Plus, so you will still be playing your Preservation Evoker in Mythic Plus, no problem, but also the only reason why you are not seeing Chrono Warden Evoker isn't because Chrono Warden would be around here. Chrono Warden more likely would be around here. The only reason you're not seeing it is because Flameshaper is here. So even if putting your heads in front and starting to cope about it, even if Flameshaper were to be nuked from orbit completely, you will still have a very good raid healing spec and still the default spec you're already playing in Mythic Plus. And with this, we have now underlined the current situation around healers for this first Mythic raiding week, because as mentioned, this was the thing most worthy of note for this first week. Nothing really too incredibly surprising happening when it came to the DPS. We really had more of a surprise when it came to the healer's choice as well as the hero talent of those healers. So with this, we plan to explain a little bit, especially for the healing impaired players, especially the ones looking at the race to world first, kind of wondering what's going on with this spec, how is it working and why is it being so powerful at the moment. So with this out of the way, we can now leave each other on this Sunday. Thanks, of course, as usual, for everyone for having watched the video, as well as for supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, today I felt like a pregnant woman. I had my monthly craving of pizza, so that's what we had to eat tonight.